front desk clerk's voice carried further than he probably intended. "Sir, I've explained this twice now. The lobby seating is for registered guests." Jocelyn Prichard had been about to turn her cart toward the service corridor when she heard it. She slowed. The man at the center of the lobby was old, perhaps late 70s, wearing a cardigan that had been mended at both elbows and carrying a canvas bag printed with the logo of a library branch that had closed 3 years ago. He stood with the careful posture of someone who had once been tall, but time had rounded his shoulders. "I'm waiting for my daughter," he said. "She's 20 minutes away. I spoke with a young woman at the desk earlier and she said—" "That wasn't me," the clerk said, "and I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. We have seating near the entrance for. It's -14 out there." A pause. "Sir, I'm sorry, but our policy—" "His name is Walter." Both men turned. Jocelyn hadn't planned to say anything. The words simply came out the way words do when you stop negotiating with yourself. "His name is Walter," she said again, steadier this time, "and he's been sitting quietly in that chair for 20 minutes without bothering a single person." The clerk looked at her uniform, her cart, the way she was positioned between him and Walter, like a small inconvenience that wouldn't move. "Miss Prichard, this isn't your department." "I know," she looked at the old man. "Is your phone dead, sir?" Walter exhaled. "Battery, I meant to charge it before I left." "Come with me." She walked him past the luggage rack to a small alcove near the business center, where a discreet power bar ran behind a potted ficus. She knelt and plugged his phone in herself, then looked up at him the way she sometimes looked at her daughter when she needed to know everything was going to be fine. "You'll have enough charge to call her in 10 minutes, she said. "I'll get you a coffee." "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask." She bought the coffee from the kiosk near the elevator with her own money. $4.80. It was Tuesday, which meant payday was still 4 days away, and her account held enough for groceries and the partial hydro payment she'd been deferring since November. $4.80 was not nothing. She handed him the cup. He held it with both hands the way people do when they've been cold for a while. "You're very kind," he said. "It's just coffee." "No," he said quietly, "it's not." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing and returned to her cart. What Jocelyn could not have seen from where she stood was the woman seated in the wingback chair near the north windows. She had arrived 12 minutes earlier, ordered nothing, and opened no laptop. She wore a cream blazer and flat-heeled shoes, and her hair was silver in the way of women who had made a decision about it a long time ago and never looked back. Her name was Ingrid Caldwell. She was the chairwoman of Caldwell Property Group, which owned 43 hotels across Canada, including 4 currently under acquisition review. She had come to the Meridian Grand incognito, as she often did when evaluating whether a property was worth absorbing into her portfolio. She had seen everything. Jocelyn was back on the 4th floor, running sheets through the laundry closet when her supervisor, Clive Stanton, appeared in the doorway. "Prichard, my office." His office was a room behind the maintenance hub that smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. He sat, she stood. "You used the business center alcove for a non-guest," he said. "I let him charge his phone in an empty corner. You purchased food from the lobby kiosk and gave it to a non-guest. I bought him a coffee with my own money. You interrupted a front desk operation." He was a 78-year-old man who was cold. Clive set down his pen. "Jocelyn, I like you. You've been here 4 years. You're reliable. Guests have never filed a complaint about your rooms, and you cover shifts when nobody else will. But today you overstepped." She thought of her daughter Lila, of the daycare invoice on her kitchen counter, of the lease renewal coming in February she still hadn't figured out. She thought of all the things she should say right now to protect herself. "His daughter was 20 minutes away," she said instead. "It was -14. I gave him somewhere to sit and something warm to drink. If that's a fireable offense, then the problem is with the policy, not with me." Clive looked at her for a long moment. "I'll need to write this up." "I understand." She finished her shift, changed in the locker room, and took the elevator down. The wingback chair near the north window was empty. Walter was gone. She hoped his daughter had come. She pushed through the revolving door into the cold. A woman in a cream blazer was standing on the pavement outside. "You were the one inside," Ingrid said. It wasn't a question. Jocelyn stopped. "I'm sorry." "The woman who helped the older gentleman. That was you." "Yes. I watched what happened. You bought him coffee with your own money." Jocelyn pulled her jacket tighter. "It was just coffee." "You said that to him too." Ingrid studied her with the unhurried attention of someone accustomed to reading situations quickly. "What's your name?" "Jocelyn Prichard." "I'm Ingrid Caldwell." The name registered slowly, then all at once. Jocelyn straightened without meaning to. "The Caldwell Group." "Yes, I was inside evaluating this property. I wasn't expecting to see what I saw. I didn't know anyone was watching." "I know." Ingrid seemed to find this significant. "Are you walking to transit?" "Yes." "Walk with me." The January air was sharp and still. Their breath made small clouds. Ingrid asked questions the way someone does when they're genuinely curious. How long Jocelyn had worked at the Meridian, what she'd done before, whether she had children. "A daughter," Jocelyn said. "She's 6. Her name is Lila." "You're raising her alone?" "Her father left when she was 2. We manage." Ingrid was quiet for a moment. "You spent your own money on that coffee." "It wasn't much." "It was everything you thought you could spare." "I suspect those are not the same thing." Jocelyn didn't respond. There was nothing to argue with in that. At the corner where their paths diverged, Ingrid stopped and opened her bag. She produced a card, ivory, embossed, the Caldwell Group crest in one corner. "Come to my office Thursday morning," she said. 9 o'clock. Jocelyn looked at the card. "For what?" "I'll explain Thursday." "I have a shift Thursday." "I'll have someone handle that." Ingrid's eyes were direct and calm. "What you did today was not a small thing, Jocelyn. Most people would have kept walking. The ones who didn't would have wanted to be seen doing it." She paused. "You didn't know I was there." "That shouldn't matter." "It's the only thing that matters." Ingrid's car arrived. She opened the door and then turned back. "Thursday, 9 o'clock. And if tonight becomes difficult, that card has a number on the back. My assistant answers even in the evenings." The car pulled away. Jocelyn stood at the corner with the card in her gloved hand. She found out the next morning that she had been terminated. The letter had come by email at 7:43 a.m. Policy violation, conduct unbecoming, disruption of front-of-house operations. 4 years of covering extra shifts, of never calling in sick, of learning the name of every regular guest and the allergy notes of every returning family. 4 years erased by a cup of coffee she had bought with her own money for a cold old man on a Tuesday. She sat on the edge of Lila's bed for a long time after Lila left for school, looking at nothing. Then she picked up Ingrid's card and called. The Caldwell Group headquarters occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower in downtown Toronto. Jocelyn arrived Thursday in her good coat, the one she kept for parent interviews and doctor appointments, and her most reliable boots, which she had cleaned the night before with a cloth and a little olive oil because she'd run out of boot polish. The lobby was quiet and deliberate, the way expensive places always are. She almost turned back at the elevator. She didn't. Ingrid received her in a corner office with windows that faced the lake. She reviewed a handwritten summary of Jocelyn's work history, asked precise questions, and listened without interrupting. The office door opened partway through. A man entered without knocking, which suggested he did it often, and with permission. He was perhaps 40, wearing the kind of quiet clothes that cost a great deal without advertising it, carrying a tablet under one arm. "Sebastian," Ingrid said, "this is Jocelyn Prichard. She's the woman from the Meridian." Sebastian Ward looked at Jocelyn with an expression that was professionally neutral and personally curious in a proportion she hadn't expected. The housekeeper who got herself fired for buying an old man coffee. "That's one way to describe it," Jocelyn said. Something shifted in his face. "Fair point, that was reductive." Ingrid asked him to stay. The interview continued for another 40 minutes. Sebastian's questions were harder than Ingrid's and more pointed. and Jocelyn answered them plainly. She did not perform more certainty than she had. When she didn't know something, she said so and explained how she would find out. When he asked whether she thought she could succeed in a corporate environment given her background, she said, "I've been doing skilled work for 4 years that most people in this building would find harder than they expect. I'm not intimidated by expertise. I'm only intimidated by pretending to have it when I don't." Sebastian leaned back. "And if someone with more credentials and fewer manners tries to cut across you in a meeting?" "I'd let them finish," Jocelyn said, "and then I'd say what I came to say." She saw Ingrid suppress a smile. By the end of the morning, she had been offered a position as an operations coordinator trainee in the Caldwell Group's guest experiences division, a salary that, for the first time in 4 years, would not require her to calculate whether she could afford to replace Lila's winter boots before March. Structured training, evening college subsidized by the company, a desk with her name on a small placard beside it. "I want to earn this," Jocelyn said. "I know," Ingrid said. "That's why I'm giving it to you." Sebastian shook her hand at the door. "Welcome to the Caldwell Group, Jocelyn." "Thank you. Sebastian is fine." He smiled at that, a small surprised thing. "Sebastian it is then." The first weeks were hard. The software was unfamiliar. The pace of meetings was faster than anything she'd known. The language was full of terms that everyone around her seemed to have been born knowing. A woman named Odette Kirby had been with the guest experience division for 6 years. She was polished in a way that went all the way through her. Her vocabulary, her posture, the way she placed her coffee cup at exactly the same distance from her laptop every single morning. She had been widely expected to lead the new coast-to-coast service review that Ingrid had assigned to the division 6 months before Jocelyn arrived. When Jocelyn was placed on the same team, Odette smiled warmly at the introductory meeting and offered to help with the filing systems. She was never unkind. She was simply present always in a way that reminded Jocelyn of exactly how new she was. Jocelyn stayed late to learn what she'd missed during the day. She came in on Saturday mornings when the office was quiet. She asked her direct supervisor, a steadfast woman named Kezia, the same question 3 times if she needed to, and never asked it a 4th. She learned the names of the cleaning staff on every floor, and the security guard who worked overnights. When she helped a young maintenance worker carry a broken chair to storage because she happened to be near the elevator, when he appeared, a senior analyst told her she didn't have to do that anymore. "I know," she said. "He needed a hand." Sebastian heard about it. He didn't say anything. He simply began paying attention in a different way. 3 months into her trainee position, Jocelyn noticed something in the booking data for 4 of the Caldwell Group's mid-range hotels. Occupancy was holding, but revenue per available room had been quietly declining for 11 months in increments too small to trigger an automatic flag. When she traced the pattern, she found it connecting to the same third-party vendor contract across all 4 properties. She brought it to Kezia. Kezia brought it to Sebastian. Sebastian brought it to the division. Odette, in the meeting, called it an interesting preliminary observation that would need to be validated by someone with more analytical experience. Jocelyn laid out 17 months of data in a format clear enough to read without interpretation. "I'm happy to walk through the methodology," she said. The validation confirmed everything she'd found. The contract went back under review. 2 of the 4 hotels reversed their revenue decline within the quarter. Ingrid recommended her for the National Service Audit Team, the project that had originally been expected to carry Odette's name. 2 days after the announcement, Jocelyn found a message from an unknown number on her work account, a screenshot. It appeared to show an internal file, one of the confidential guest satisfaction reports, with her credentials in the edit history, time-stamped after hours, no context, no sender name. She stared at it and felt something cold settle in her chest. 3 days later, Kezia called her into a small meeting room. Sebastian was already inside. So was the head of data security. "A complaint was filed," Kezia said carefully. "Someone alleged that confidential guest data from the audit files was accessed outside of authorized hours and shared externally." I didn't do that, Jocelyn said. Your credentials appear in the access log. I reviewed those files during business hours. I didn't remove anything. Sebastian said nothing. He looked at her steadily, and she could not read what was behind his eyes. We'll need to investigate, Kezia said. You'll be on paid leave while we do. She took the elevator down alone. 4 years of covering shifts no one else wanted. 3 months of staying late. 1 anonymous email from an unknown number. She called Ingrid from the pavement outside. I didn't do it, she said. I know, Ingrid said. You don't know that yet. No, Ingrid said. But I know the difference between what evidence looks like and what it is. We will find out which it is. Don't disappear, Jocelyn. She spent the week at home with Lila, helping her with a science project about snowflakes and trying not to let the anxiety show in her face. At night, after Lila was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote down every file she had accessed and every action she had taken, because the truth was the only tool she had, and she wanted it to be precise. On the 6th day, Sebastian called. The investigation had traced the external access to a device that was not Jocelyn's. The credentials had been used remotely via a shared login that should have been decommissioned after a system migration 3 months earlier, a migration that Odette had overseen. The timestamp on the complaint matched the night Odette had stayed late while Jocelyn was at Lila's school concert. The complaint itself, when its metadata was examined, had been drafted on Odette's workstation. Your record is clean, Sebastian said. We're meeting tomorrow morning. Ingrid wants you there. She was in the boardroom at 9. Ingrid, Sebastian, Kezia, the data security lead. The file access was not authorized by you and was not performed by you, Ingrid said. The complaint was filed using a falsified trail that has been fully traced. Your professional record within this organization is clear. That is official. Jocelyn nodded once. I want to know, Ingrid continued, how you're doing. The question was so direct and so unexpected that Jocelyn had to look away for a moment. I'm tired, she said honestly. I spent a week being afraid that one set of files was going to turn me back into the story people told about me when I walked in the door. What story? Sebastian asked. She met his eyes, the housekeeper who got lucky. The room was quiet. You were never lucky, Ingrid said. You were ready when the opportunity came. Those are not the same thing. Odette was called into a separate meeting that afternoon. She was dismissed for falsifying records and misuse of system credentials. The company referred the matter to its legal team. What happens to her now? Jocelyn asked when Ingrid told her. That's hers to work out. Was she good at her job? Ingrid considered it honestly. She was very good at it. She simply confused seniority with entitlement and couldn't forgive the company for disagreeing. Jocelyn absorbed that. I'm sorry for her. Sebastian, standing near the window, turned to look at her. Don't be sorry, Ingrid said. But remember it. Bitterness makes people capable of things they'd otherwise find unrecognizable in themselves. Jocelyn was reinstated and formally added to the National Service Audit Team. At the quarter-end review, her recommendation to restructure the mid-range hotel service protocols was adopted across 9 properties. Ingrid promoted her to Operations Coordinator, a real title with real authority, and a salary that meant Jocelyn could finally renew her lease without calculating how many overtime hours it would cost. Her first purchase was a proper pair of winter boots, not luxury, just reliable. When Sebastian noticed them during a brutal February morning, as they walked from the parking garage to the building entrance, she pointed at them with the solemnity of someone making an important declaration. These will last me 10 years, she said. That's a specific projection. I bought my last pair from a liquidation sale, and they lasted 3.5 seasons. I've done the math. He laughed, a real laugh, uncalculated, a little surprised. She had noticed by then that he was a man who was careful with his reactions, who had learned to keep them measured in rooms full of people looking for leverage. The unguarded ones were rarer. She valued them more than he knew. They had grown closer in the way that people do when they spend enough time in the same pressurized spaces. Shared lunches after long meetings, conversations that began about procurement logistics, and drifted toward other things. He told her once that he'd spent his adult life suspicious of people who wanted proximity to the Caldwell name. My last serious relationship ended when she sold an interview about my mother's private health situation to a magazine, he said. Without telling me, without asking. Jocelyn was quiet for a moment. I didn't know your mother's name for 3 days after I met her. I don't think I could have told anyone anything worth selling. He looked at her sideways. That's not the point. I know, she said. I just mean, when someone is the story you actually want, you don't need the version that gets published. He didn't answer, but she noticed he remembered the conversation. Their first dinner was at a small restaurant in the annex. No tablecloths, mismatched chairs, handwritten menus. Jocelyn had expected somewhere impressive. This place was warm. You could have chosen anywhere, she said. I chose somewhere I'd actually enjoy, he said. I spend enough time in places that are impressive. Over dinner, she told him about the week of paid leave, about sitting at her kitchen table, making her list of every file she'd touched, because it was the only way she knew how to hold herself together. You weren't angry, he asked. I was terrified, she said. Anger would have been easier. Why terrified? She looked at her glass. I spent 4 years in that hotel, convincing myself that if I worked hard enough and asked for nothing I didn't earn, I'd be fine. And then I spent 3 months doing the same thing here, and one anonymous email nearly undid all of it. She paused. Not the job, I nearly undid myself. Stopped trusting my own judgment. Started wondering whether I'd been fooling myself the whole time. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. You weren't. I know that now. You knew it the whole time, he said. You just couldn't prove it yet. It was such a simple thing to say. She couldn't explain why it landed the way it did. They walked back toward the parking garage in light snow. At the corner of the building, where an awning offered a few feet of shelter, he stopped walking. I don't know how to do this without being careful, he said. I know. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that when I'm careful, it isn't because of you. Sebastian. Yeah. Just say what you're actually trying to say. He looked at her for a moment, and then, without any further preparation, he kissed her. It was quiet, no performance to it, just a question, the way first kisses sometimes are. She answered by not stepping back. 2 months later, with spring beginning to suggest itself along the lakeshore, Ingrid's assistant cross-referenced a neighborhood association near Scarborough with Ontario Pension Services records. It took some careful work, but they found him. Walter Finch was living in a modest townhouse in East York, renting a room from a family he'd known for 30 years. His daughter visited every week. The arthritis in his hands had worsened, but he was fine. Jocelyn visited on a Saturday, without cameras, without anyone from the company. She brought proper tea and a coffee from the good place on the corner, because she remembered what he'd said about the cup she'd bought him. He recognized her immediately. I prayed for you, he said, every single day since January. She sat across from him in his small, sun-filled room. He had been a high school history teacher for 34 years. He had 3 grandchildren. He had written a self-published book about the history of railways in northern Ontario that had sold exactly 212 copies, and he was deeply proud of every one. I thought you rescued me, he said, after she had explained everything that had happened. You gave me something to hold on to, she said. When everything was going wrong, I kept thinking about what you said, that it wasn't just coffee. You reminded me that the small things aren't small. He put his cup down with both hands, the way she remembered from the alcove in January. What is your daughter's name? Leela. Bring her next time. She arranged for the Caldwell Group's Community Foundation to connect Walter with a meal support program run through a neighborhood hub 2 blocks from his house. She made one condition. He was to be treated as a participant, not a recipient. He was a 34-year veteran educator, she told the program coordinator, and if they ever needed someone to speak to the Tuesday lunch group about the history of the CN Rail, she knew a man. By autumn, Jocelyn was an operations manager with a team of 4. The National Service audit had produced a framework that Ingrid was presenting to the board as the new guest experience standard across all 43 properties. Jocelyn had written the first draft. She still greeted every cleaning staff member she passed in the hallway by name. She knew who had kids in school, and who was studying at night, and who needed the early shift, and who needed the late one. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible in a building where everyone around you was dressed to be seen. She never let herself forget. Sebastian proposed in September. They were standing on the dock at his cottage on Lake Simcoe just before sunsets. He did it the way he did everything that mattered, without ceremony, without hedging. "I don't want to rescue you," he said. "You've made it very clear over the past year that you don't need that." 12 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, she said. He smiled. "I want to build something beside you. Jocelyn Prichard, will you marry me?" She said yes before he finished the sentence. Ingrid cried when they told her, which she immediately denied. Then she began discussing the wedding in considerable detail, until Jocelyn gently suggested that some of those decisions perhaps belonged to the two people actually getting married. Ingrid looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then she laughed and pulled her into an embrace that was, Jocelyn thought, the most genuine thing she had witnessed in a boardroom-adjacent space since she had arrived. The wedding was small, a restored heritage hall in Stratford, 70 guests, wildflowers, afternoon light coming through tall windows. Lila was the flower girl. She took the role with the grave solemnity of someone who understood its full importance. Walter sat in the second row in a pressed dark jacket he had worn to his daughter's graduation. He told Jocelyn before the ceremony that he'd bought it secondhand in 1997 and considered it his lucky garment. "You've worn it to every good thing," she said. "Now I'm wearing it to yours," he said. Kezia was there. So was the overnight security guard, who had declined the invitation 3 times before accepting it. The data security lead who had run the investigation came with her husband. 2 members of the cleaning staff from the building's East Tower attended, having never been to anything with canapes, and they handled the situation with great and quiet dignity. At the dinner, Walter was given the floor because Jocelyn had asked him to say something, because she trusted him to say the thing that was true. He stood slowly, with Jocelyn's hand briefly on his arm for balance, and looked out at the room. "Last January," he said, "I was sitting in a hotel lobby waiting for my daughter, and I couldn't prove I had a right to be there. A young woman I had never met charged my phone, bought me a coffee, and sat me somewhere warm. She was fired for it the same afternoon." He paused. She was not trying to change her life. She was trying to be decent. Another pause. "What I want to say to everyone in this room is this. What looks small when you're deciding whether to do it can become the whole world to the person on the other side of it. Jocelyn didn't give me coffee. She gave me back the sense that I still mattered to someone. And I pray that every person here finds the courage to do a small thing for someone when no one important is watching. Because that is when character is real." The hall was very quiet. Lila, seated between Kezia and Walter, reached over and held the old man's hand. Jocelyn pressed her fingers to her eyes. Sebastian passed her a handkerchief, an actual linen handkerchief, which she found so impractical and so entirely like him that she laughed and cried at the same time. She thought of the Tuesday in January when she had heard a clerk's voice carrying across a lobby. She thought of $4.80. She thought of standing on a winter pavement, holding a business card she didn't know what to do with, thinking that tonight would probably be like every other night. It had not been like every other night. She had not become valuable because Ingrid Caldwell had found her. She had always been who she was. What the last year had given her was time and room and the slow accumulating proof that who she had always been was more than enough. The dock at Lake Simcoe at sunset, a small girl scattering wildflower petals with absolute commitment, an old man in his lucky jacket sitting in the second row holding a 6-year-old's hand, a woman who had spent 4 years being invisible in other people's buildings, now standing at the center of her own life, finally taking up exactly as much space as she deserved. Before we go, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. These stories travel further than we ever expect, and we love knowing where they land. If Jocelyn's story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs a reminder today that kindness is never wasted. Because sometimes the smallest thing you give away, $4.80, an empty corner, a cup of something warm, becomes the beginning of everything you were always meant to find.